It was October 2015 when my parents could finally make the vacation they had been dreaming of for several years. Without exaggerating, when my siblings and I were kids, we had gotten used to having a few days of vacation every year, almost always on some beach in the country, but then black times came for the family that addressed illnesses and economic problems, and soon these annual trips became just a memory. Almost 5 years later, we finally managed to have them again on a long weekend. This time it wasn't a beach. On the contrary, given the heat that was hitting the city, we decided to look for a more contrasting and economical place. A place in the cold forest where we could wake up and smell the fog in the morning. My parents had booked some cabins that some uncles had already recommended to us, and the truth is that I was excited because I was taking a photography class at the university and I felt that the forest would give me good opportunities to finish some rolls of film and be able to bring something interesting to the next class. We arrived tired after that trip on the road, and I remember very well that I, apart from the bathroom, needed to take a long shower when we arrived as I felt very tired. However, we had to wait until the owner of the cabin arrived, half an hour after us, and showed us the place and its surroundings. He explained a few things to us and then pointed out a path that was a shortcut to the town instead of taking the long way around the road. We had just arrived. "You can call me if you want," he said, "but there's very little signal here. I'm going out and I'm going to let the tree." He pointed because I feel that there is. He grabbed a little more, left us alone. My siblings started running around outside with a ball even though it was getting dark, and my parents raided the pantry they had brought to start making dinner. I took the opportunity to take that hot bath I needed so much. There wasn't a great view of the place, although we were very high because the trees surrounded us, but it looked just like in the photos, and the fog was even starting to surround the pines, the cabin, us. I went to take a bath. And for a moment I heard as if someone had spoken to me. I turned off the shower and asked aloud, but there was no answer. I continued bathing and heard something else, but also couldn't quite identify what it was. I decided to ignore it. After all, we were in a forest and I wasn't very familiar with the sounds of nature. I finished bathing and kept hearing it. It was like an animal, like something scratching. It was behind the wall, running along it from the ceiling to the floor. I thought it was maybe a branch behind the bathroom, although I didn't see any trees that close. I didn't see anything strange in the cabin when we walked around it outside, but okay, I was sure there was nothing to worry about, so much so that I didn't even tell my parents, but that night I had a very bad dream. I was the only one who got a room alone, and I heard all night as if something was breathing very close to me. I think this fever hit me at some point and I had already woken up several times feeling very bad. One of these times I woke up, I saw the door open and my mom in the middle watching me. I asked her what was wrong and she told me that she just wanted to check that everything was okay. She came in to check my window and gave me a goodnight kiss. "I'll be right back," she told me. "I'm not going to stay with you anymore in the morning." Feeling a little better, they told me everything that had happened the night before. While they were making coffee, my brothers heard someone walking on the wooden floor that surrounded the house. One of them had fallen asleep in the living room and went to wake up the other. "Calm down," he said, "it probably wasn't anything. Maybe there are deer around here or something. But you're calm." Then I hear them. He does too and realizes that something was doing something on two legs walking around us, something big. They ran to wake up my dad without making any noise and he went looking for something to go out and check. It was at that moment that my mom went to calm me down in my room. My dad and my brothers came out, took knives from the kitchen, a bat, and so they went out to check. Although they heard movement among the trees, they couldn't see anything. The darkness that night in the forest without a moon and surrounded by tall trees was. In total, I assumed that, since I felt bad, my mom had stayed with me the rest of the night. That cold, cloudy morning we were more worried about what happened the night before. We couldn't enjoy our escape. My parents told us not to go far from the cabin and my brothers only talked about what it could have been and what the best plan would be to defend ourselves if someone attacked us in a place like that. I saw them almost amused by the plans, as if they were living their own horror movie. We were already inside and they were still talking in the living room, and then from my room I heard them. Even more startled, I went out to listen carefully to what they were saying and saw them glued to the window. "There's something there behind those trees, look." I approached them to tell them to please not scare me with that, but I could see how a huge black figure about 190 moved from one tree to another. It wasn't much more than 40 meters from our cabin. We told my dad what was there but asked him not to go out to check. He suggested that we go in the van to the town to look for the cabin owner, but the truth is we preferred not to take that road. At that moment it was too lonely. One of my brothers offered to run down the path that led more directly to the town, but obviously that wasn't a good idea either, so only my dad went out and approached the place they had indicated, where there was more signal, and there he waited to send a message. It took him about 20 minutes to return while the message was sent, and the owner replied that she was on her way. By this time we realized that the whole afternoon had passed us by. It was about to get dark again, and outside the cabin everything seemed to have a blue filter, and the fog was so thick that it looked more like I myself was a really beautiful landscape, and for a moment, knowing that the owner was going to arrive at any moment, I felt that we were even starting to relax. It's our imagination. Maybe I didn't tell them. Maybe it was just someone who was passing by the path and noticed us and looking at us all scared. The others who made it coincide except for my mom. Yes, there is something strange. Yesterday that I'm going to check on you at night, it's very clear that someone was standing outside your window. I didn't want to scare you, but that's why I stayed there with you, and the next hour my mom and dad spent fighting in the room, arguing about why I hadn't told him normally what I had seen, but my mom also had arguments for not having done it. We heard footsteps on the wood outside and approached the door, thinking that the owner had already arrived. But we didn't see anyone. Before we could go tell my parents, we heard a laugh in the distance, but somehow also very close at the same time. We all heard it. My sister ran out of the room, and then we heard something else. Something was moving in my brother's room, so loud now. It was very well. Some things hanging on the wall. Ran to see who was there, but there was no one in the room, and the wall moved again. We ran to the car, and just when one of my dads was going to go back for my mom's bag and her wallet, the owner arrived with a pickup truck with some guys. My dad motioned to him and told him that there was someone in there, and two of them got off to check the cabin corner by corner. Eventually they managed to find something, a kind of shelter built in the interior walls with clothes, food scraps. Someone had made a hole in one of the corners of the ceiling and had been inhabiting this cabin, apparently, throughout it, when there were no guests, and he returned to the wall when there was someone. Sure, here is the text translated into English. The weekend was coming to an end. The most horrible thing was that through this wall he could reach the bathroom, the shower, and although the owner assured us that there was no way he could have seen inside, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had felt in common. I felt him scratching that wall a few centimeters from me through the living room and through my brother's room, where we heard him for the last time. If there were cracks that allowed him to observe them, we all decided not to make it public, because we knew that the cabin was the only way to maintain the owner's income, and he assured us that he knew nothing and that he was going to solve it, but from what we learned it was never with the person who was hiding there. By the time they finished checking everything, it was almost 5 in the morning, and although the man invited us to stay at that moment, at that hour we decided to return home. 2 years later, when we were able to have vacations again, we preferred to return to the beach. I don't know what you will think, community, but I am going to share with you the most terrifying experience I have ever lived. The most beautiful memory I have until today. I have always liked to have dates out of the ordinary, and this that I am going to tell you happened when I was just starting to go out with a girl who today is my wife. I had scout friends who constantly invited me with them to their walks, but I never accepted. However, when they told me about a very beautiful waterfall that formed not far from the city in rainy seasons, I was interested. They said that you had to walk about 10 kilometers to get there, 10 kilometers in the middle of nowhere, but that it was a perfect place and that it was worth it, and I thought it was the right adventure to get lost for a whole day with my girlfriend. When I proposed it to her, she happily accepted and prepared herself. She even had the right shoes for it. I didn't, but at that moment I didn't care. I was remembering the instructions well on the way, or rather, the details that my friends had given to get there. We left the car in the same place as them, in a lay-by next to the road, and I started looking around for the train track that I had to follow. There was no problem because if I followed the track I wasn't going to miss it. The only detail is that, according to what they said, we had to go through a bridge where there was no more space than the train, although the truth is that on that route it was already rare when they passed, and as they had described it to me, not far from the road was the tunnel. You could see a tunnel that crossed a hill about 200 meters long. It was a bit scary, but if we started our walk with a tunnel from the very beginning, it was exciting and we were doing something that